Hello! Hi, everybody. Welcome to Poetry and Determining Meaning Through Poetry Form. I'm Laura Walton. Let me share the screen with you so you can see what the heck I'm talking about. All right, so today I'm going to be talking about, again, reading poetry and determining meaning through form. Before I talk about that, of course, my usual is if you are not following us on, the Twitters, the Instagrams, the YouTubes, and all the good things at Think 5, well, why are you not doing that? It's free. You should do it. Follow us, and you find out where all these live streams are. And then go to Fiveable and subscribe to us because it's fantastic. And then you also never miss anything. So there you go. Shameless plug. Here we go. So today, we're going to be talking about elements of form. So what I'm talking about with when you're looking at a poem, the different elements that you are going to be looking for in order to determine meaning and determine tone from the pieces of that poem. That is not just like subject matter. I'll specifically be diving into rhyme, rhythm, and different forms, but I'll be touching on some other parts of what you might look for in a poem. And yeah, so we'll talk. If we have time at the end, we'll go through some other fun forms. If not, I'll just get through what I can. So ask away. So if you see a word on the screen, you're like, what the heck is that? And I don't explain it, please ask me. All right, well, let's get started. The first phrase I want to give you, because a lot of times when I talk form and I'm talking like the pieces of a poem that are not the subject matter, like the poem's about a whale, and I'm not talking about a whale, I'm talking about how the poet talks about it through his rhyme or through his rhythm. I will get students that will say, well, do you think the poet meant to do that? And my answer is this: nothing in serious literature happens by accident. So the answer then in a simpler way is absolutely the poet meant to do that. If the poet bothers to write it, the poet bothers to have put rhyme scheme or put rhythm into it, they did it on purpose, and they're using that rhythm or that rhyme or that form to enhance the meaning of their poem. So if you see it, it's probably doing something. And today, hopefully you'll have a better grasp of how to explain how those things work. And again, if you got questions as we go, like how do I put that in a sentence? How do I make that work in an essay? Ask away, and I'll give you that. I'll try to do that as I'm doing the stream. But so nothing in serious literature happens by accident. That's not the first time I'll say that tonight. My theme's Harry Potter tonight, so you better like it. So elements of form you should be noticing. It's also close to Halloween. So Harry Potter's like Halloween, Christmas sort of like theme-ish, but also I love Harry Potter, so whatever. I bet there's some of you that love it and some of you that hate it. Not everyone. There's always like one hater, and that's okay. Not everyone is into it, but whatever. Oh, okay, everyone. Fair enough. We'll just pretend like it's okay, we'll pretend like it's everyone. I love it. I'm a Ravenclaw. You could put who you are in the chat if you want to. So things you're going to be looking at. Rhyme. I'll go into more detail about this, like specifically later on, but I'm going to be looking at rhyme scheme, types of rhyme, and where the rhyme actually is in the poem. So if it's changing, if it's what's the word? Like it's using the seam rhyme, if it's a half rhyme, a slant rhyme, things like that, or if it's a full rhyme, that makes a difference in the meaning and why the author might do it. I'll talk about rhythm a little bit. Those of you that there's some people who have done a lot with rhythm in poems and some people have done none, and that has to do with things like, you may have heard of Iambic pentameter. That is part of rhythm. I'll break that down for you because I know that I always want to do that in my classes, but I never get a chance to, and tonight I get the chance to tell you about rhythm and how to actually use it. So I'll break it down into little bitty pieces so it's more understandable. Some things I won't go into big. Oh, I see some Gryffindor, Hufflepuff. Oh, we got 2 Hufflepuffs. Excellent. I'm friends with everybody. It won't matter. Anyone a Slytherin? I'm curious. Slytherins are fine too. If I weren't a Ravenclaw, I'd probably be a Slytherin. Anyway, stanza breaks in length. And I'll show you an example in just a moment. I think on the next slide. Yeah, so I've got some examples for the next slide. The last stream I did, the poem that I was using actually works really well for form, so I'll show you some of that. So like stanza breaks in length, where you see like, just as a review, a stanza is of course like a paragraph in a poem. Wherever the author decides to break that stanza may determine what meaning or tone that they're trying to get you to understand in that place. So again, there's nothing that happens by accident in serious literature. So if it ends in the middle of a sentence, then the author wants you to look at how that sentence changes if you split it in half. So you can mention that in your essay, saying that the author chose to split the sentence in half because he or she wants you to wants to emphasize this part of it, or wants to show a split tone, or might want to have a tone shift here. Stanza length as well. If one stanza is significantly longer than another stanza, then maybe the author is thinking that that's more important, not more important, but putting more emphasis on the longer stanza than the short stanza, or vice versa. So those are things you can talk about. Olivia's a Slytherin, nice. That's funny. Enjambment, that's kind of goes with line breaks. So in case you don't remember what enjambment is, and I'll go to the next slide as well. Enjambment is when a poet splits up a sentence and goes into the next line. And usually that's not separated by a comma. So I'll show you an example. I'll point it out. So enjambment, so this is the poem that I was looking at last time when I was with y'all. So lots of stuff. The enjambment here appears actually in the first two lines. So Sundays too, my father got up early and put his clothes on in the blue-black cold. So early and then it goes to and. The enjambment is between those sentences. So he split up that long phrase into the next sentence. But probably the bigger piece of enjambment here that actually does have a comma is when he goes to that second stanza into the third stanza. Fearing the chronic angers of that house, speaking indifferently to him. That's the same sentence, but it's split into two different stanzas. So that's enjambment. So you want to look at those things like, why would the author choose to break his lines here, or her lines here? Robert Hayden's a man, that's why I said he. So you can determine, so that's one of the ways that you can pull meaning or tone out of that by saying that, okay, I want, for example, in this particular poem, that maybe he wants to highlight, for fearing the chronic angers of the house, speaking indifferently to him. That's kind of a tone shift happening there, if you're familiar with this poem. I think I'm not the only one who's actually done this poem in the live streams. But last time we had talked about that there's a feeling of kind of remorse and regret, but also this fear of his father. And I believe we talked about that the tone shifts from fear in the first two stanzas to more remorse and regret, and that's why that sentence is split there. So you could say that in an essay, like the author uses enjambment in order to show a tone shift, if that makes sense. If it doesn't, and you're like, I need you to explain that again, Laura, please do ask a question. Those are ways to use that. I think I told you, yeah, line length. So that's another element of form that you can look at to say, hey, this creates meaning by this can be part of an author's style. Like they can use long lines or short lines, but it can also be like if an author switches from using a bunch of long lines in a poem to short lines, then that is a way for them to draw your eye to, oh, okay, that's weird. Why would they switch that? Oh, the meaning changed here, or the tone changed here. And so you can use that to explain something. Same thing with stanza length, same thing with poem length as well. If it's a long poem about I guess not a short subject, but something's like a long poem about something that you don't think someone could write a long poem about. It's like, oh, okay, well, maybe they're putting a lot of importance on that. Or a short poem about love. It's like, okay, love is a huge subject. Why would they write so short about it? So that's something else to think about as well. You always want to look at repetition, and that repetition goes with form, and so does length of lines and repetition of lines and enjambment. Those can go with particular forms of poems, so that might be a reason why an author also uses things like enjambment or stanza breaks, or repeating words or phrases or lines and other elements. So we'll look more at repetition with the particular poems we're going to look at today, types of poems, and poems, I guess. The main thing to actually look at this for is changes to any of these elements. So if you see a consistent pattern going on for a poem, so they have the same rhyme scheme, it's like A, A, B, B, and then C, C, D, D keeps going on, and then suddenly the rhyme scheme completely changes, then, so my question to you is, if you see that, what might that indicate from an author? Why would the poet decide to maybe change the rhyme scheme? What might be a reason why? And that is, again, to you. Don't be shy. Say anything. What could that be? Or changing any of these elements, really. So it doesn't have to be necessarily changing the rhyme scheme. Oh, you're fine. So yeah, okay. So if you're changing so my question was, if you're changing, if you see an author has changed something all of a sudden, like you see a pretty consistent rhyme scheme or pretty consistent rhythm, or you've seen him or her repeat the same words, what might that indicate? So I see calls attention to a specific moment. Yes, if there's a change, then your eye is drawn to that. So you can explain that when the author changes the rhythm here, he or she is also changing the tone or what the subject is. For it to make sense. So I see that as an answer. So it could be making some, so I guess you have to be more specific about what would be making sense. Maybe the subject matter to make sense, or maybe to fit a certain, maybe the two things that they're working on are incongruous. I see maybe they want to give a hint that something bad is going on. Sure. So if it's like you think that everything's sing-songy and happy and rhymey and suddenly it's not and it's jarring, you're like, oh my God, then yeah, that can always see big or bad. Big or bad can work actually. Yeah, something big is happening, definitely. So those are reasons why. So if you see a change in a poem and you're like, that's nothing, don't ignore it. Actually look at that change. But this does require you to look into a poem for that, for those elements of form beyond the elements of what the subject matter is or what the plot of the poem is. But that's what we're doing today. And once you keep practicing with that, you start to notice it more and more. Okay, we looked through that. Cool. Let's talk rhyme. So if you got questions, again, like I go through things quickly, or you want me to go back to something, if you have a question, once I move on to the next part, I'm happy to answer questions beyond, if it has nothing to do with rhyme or rhythm or whatever I'm talking about has to do with the poem, ask it away. So I'm just keep going until I'm asked a question. All right, so let's talk a little bit about rhyme. So how rhyme can indicate and create tone. So I got some questions for you, you lovely people. So I want you to think of your favorite song. If you don't have a favorite song, you have like a million of them, which I do too. It's when someone asks me anything with my favorite, I like freak out. I'm like, I have to choose? Just pick one. Just pick a favorite song that you have. And if you can, because I'm gonna put up my favorite song, or one of them. If you can find it for your own benefit, you don't have to put it up here or anything, but if you find it, look it up, or if you remember it really well, it's good to have a visual to see where rhyme is happening. So if you can find it, just Google it and find it. Go ahead and do that. And then considering the genre and the subject matter. And just out of curiosity, I probably won't use any of them, but I want to see, what are your favorite songs? Because I always like to see what people like. And you can type it in the chat. You don't have to, but it's fun. Now I'm going to pull up what this is. All right, Taylor Swift. I'm a fan of T Swift. She's fun. I've not heard that one because I'm woefully not around the radio very much, or looking at YouTube as much because I'm so busy. But I'll have to give that one a listen because I do like her. More Money, More Problems. All right, Notorious B.I.G. That's a good one. That is not the one I'm using tonight. Okay, Yellow Lights. Cool. Yeah, and so you could totally have like a current favorite song, like nothing. It doesn't have to be like, oh, this is my all-time favorite, or it can be like, this is the one I'm totally listening to right now. All right. Oh yeah, I like Maroon 5 too. It's like calm. It's nice and calming, and also like makes you think. All right. You know, back when I was like in middle school or high school, I always pretended like I was too cool for people like Taylor Swift or like Britney Spears or anybody like that, but I totally love them, like in this kind of deep, dark part of my heart, because they're so catchy. So it's like a different level of love. Like, so my favorite band is Pink Floyd, and that's my example today, but I also love Taylor Swift, so I love all kinds of things. I like dad rock, but I also love pop, so I love all kinds of stuff. Okay, so thinking about your favorite song. So we're gonna look at, I'm gonna actually switch what we're doing. So you're thinking about your favorite song, and I'm gonna share a different screen with you. Hello, there's my big face. There we go. And I'm going to share a song. It's not my song. I didn't write it. I'm not that great. I do like writing poetry though. So hopefully you can see it. You should be able to. So we're just looking at this for rhyme scheme. And we're going to look at another song too. So you're looking at your own poem also for rhyme scheme, or thinking about it. I think that's funny. Hopefully you can, yeah, you can see pretty well. So what do you notice about, let's just talk rhyme scheme, but we can also talk like line length in a moment, but just like, where do you notice rhyme is happening? And it can be slant rhyme. It can also be full rhyme. Slant rhyme is like half rhyme. So it kind of rhymes, but it doesn't quite do full rhyme. Where's it? Yeah, I see some, yeah, so you got pain, rail kind of rhyme, you rail and veil. So A, and you want to go like real specific, so yeah, so I got A, B, B, kind of like A, B, B, B a little bit, yeah, because tell, veil, rail rhyme enough with each other. Yeah, exchange, cage. You can also just point out the words that are rhyming there. Yeah, yeah, we got a lot of rhyming towards the end, like trees, breeze. So my question is, so you got lots of rhyme going on. Is it consistent with every stanza? Ground found. No, you're right. It's not. And not even the same number of lines per stanza. Yeah, it's not. There is a rhyme happening, but I wouldn't call it a rhyme scheme. It's just there is rhyme. There's some internal rhyme with tell and hell. And field and steel kind of rhyme there, but that could be me just, oh, I say that. I could be me stretching, but they totally did that. So that's me going with, yes, of course they wrote that on purpose. Yeah, so there's not really, even the line lengths there are not they're not the same length. They're not, and the rhyme is not going consistently like maybe a Dr. Seuss poem or something like that. No. So, and then so the kind of tone of this song is not, if you've ever listened to it, you don't even have to listen to it, you can look at the subject matter here and think like, it's not like a sing-songy, happy, gay rainbow song. It's a song about missing somebody. It's a song about somebody not being there anymore. And about like nostalgia and feeling like, oh, the past is now the past and I can't see you anymore. So it's not a particularly happy song. So the rhyme scheme may be not all over the place, like it's still, and there's a certain rhythm too when you're listening to the song as well. But so you can say like the rhyme, because it's sporadic, you could use that to say like it's going with this tone of feeling not all kind of all over the place. A tone maybe, or like the author's mood or tone feeling like they're all over the place with their feelings towards this person. The rhythm itself is not consistent, so you could say the feelings are not consistent by the oh my gosh, the poet, there we go, could not think of that word. So there's a lot of things you can talk about with that. What you can also do is compare it to another song. So my second question to you that's on my PowerPoint, but I'm not going to put this up, is think of another song that it can be one that you like or one that you maybe hate. I don't care which one it is, as long as it's like a total like 180 from the song that you pick in the first place. Yeah, sad. So if you pick a sad song in the beginning, then pick something that is maybe I would say pick a different genre. So mine is totally different. I picked dad rock first. So think of another song that is like, all right, this is one that I absolutely hate, or this is one that I just having in your head. You can say it in the chat if you want to. You don't have to if you're shy, but it's kind of fun. So if you could pick like Taylor Swift, for example, first, then you might pick like, I don't know, Depeche Mode or something. Or that's the first thing that came to mind. I don't know why. Rage Against the Machine, like all these. I'm feeling dark. I'm like wearing all black today, and I don't know why. Ah, yes, Rammstein is totally different from Taylor Swift. Absolutely. Oh my gosh, that song, Friday. Someone played that last weekend, and it was in my head for like 3 days, and I thought I had left it behind me forever in my past. I didn't. That, Olivia, that is my next song. Call Me Maybe. Totally different from Pink Floyd. So my question, not my question, so you're thinking about these songs, and so you're looking at the rhyme scheme in comparison to the first song. Oh my God, Rebecca Blackwood, another thing? Oh Lord. Okay, I won't get into that. So Call Me Maybe. I'm sure you've heard it. Maybe you have, maybe you haven't. How would you, those of you that have heard it before, how would you describe like the tone of this song? And yeah, let's just go with tone. And you see there's a rhyme there, A-A-A-B, absolutely. So we're looking at that rhyme. Yeah, it's pretty consistent. Joyful, yeah. Tone is annoying. That is your mood, Anna. And you know what? After a while, the song, I like it sometimes, and then I'm like, why did I listen to this song? Now it's in my head for 4 weeks. So annoying. Bubblegummy, ooh, I like that. Very like, yay! Yeah, totally. Tone is annoying. That's funny. Yeah, that's like the subject. Yeah, well, we can go into subject matter too. So there's a subject matter of obsession with somebody, which I didn't realize that's not the same thing as Wish You Were Here for sure, but it's still talking about a person and not obsession, but like in this song obsession, and in the first song like thinking about this person. I'm stretching it there for sure. So there's definitely different subject matter, different tone for sure from Wish You Were Here. Does the rhyme scheme and the rhythm scheme match up with that tone in this particular song, in your opinion? Or what about the rhyme scheme does match up with that tone, I should say? So my answer is yes, it does match up with that tone. What about this rhyme scheme in Call Me Maybe matches up with the tone and the theme of the song? And this is the kind of thing you have to answer on the AP exam. Like, how does the rhyme scheme actually make meaning? So that's my question to you. How does the rhyme scheme in Call Me Maybe help get that tone across? And then I take you a little bit to type up. I'll just scroll down so you can see. Yeah, emphasize what? Yeah, totally emphasizes stuff. What does it emphasize? Just in case you forgot the lyrics to the song, I'm going to scroll down for you. And have fun having the song in your head for the next month. Yeah. So, and that's a really good point, Rebecca, that it tells a story in chronological order, because this is not a, I wouldn't say this is a ballad stanza, but or in the ballad rhyme scheme, but it is a ballad stanza, which ballads do tell stories. She meant boy. Yeah, and I assume, Anna, that you meant emphasizing the tone of being lighthearted and sing-song. I can hear the instrumentals by reading the lyrics too. I put this up a couple of hours ago, like, what song should I use that will work for this? And like, oh my gosh, it has been in my head ever since and will be for the next, like I said, month. That's true. We don't know if it's a boy. It could be anybody. That is right. That was very not inclusive. Very true. So it's somebody. Anyway, so that's the way that you can use tone or you can use rhyme to say that an author is emphasizing tone. It doesn't always work out that like neatly, but in this case it kind of does. So it's like it's a very consistent rhyme scheme. It moves the poem forward, and I'm going to call it a poem because all songs are poems. It moves the song or poem forward, and it makes you go through a story. Like, this is easier to see versus kind of a sporadic rhyme scheme. You have to keep looking back and seeing what the person means. It's more cryptic. Yes. All of you. Absolutely. All inclusive, my friends. We are all inclusive here, definitely. All right, let's get out of Carly Rae Jepsen to get out of your brain. I'm sure you're just heartbroken. Hello to my big face again. All right, let's go back to the PowerPoint. All right, we thought of our favorite song, and we thought of another song. Are we up? Yes, awesome. Sorry about that. Okay, that was really, really weird. All right. So rhyme. So we talked about a lot of this. So we talked about how rhyme might work with a particular subject matter. So rhyme can work in, so when we're thinking about, and we talked about how rhyme might work ironically. Well, we didn't talk about irony. So we talked about how rhyme, like for example, in Call Me Maybe, having more of a sing-songy, consistent rhyme can move a story forward. So this is something you can say in an essay, like the rhyme scheme of this poem moves the story forward by making you read more quickly, or by imitating a children's book or something of that sort. You can also, a poem can have, I would say it can work ironically if it has a rhyme scheme like Carly Rae Jepsen used, but is talking about like really dark stuff. It's like when someone smiles and they say something like, I'm going to beat your head in. Like, that's really creepy and ironic, and I don't like it. It's super creepy. So that's a way that rhyme can work ironically with subject matter if you think of it that way. I guess I'm getting close to Halloween, so I'm thinking of weird. Again, I'm in the all black today, so I'm like in the dark mode, man. Yeah, so here's my question to you. So this is things you think about as you're reading poems in the exam as well. Why might someone pick a particular rhyme scheme? Or like let's say you're the poet, and I'm sure there's a couple of you out there that actually write poetry. I like writing poetry, and I always had a couple of kids in class who did. Why do you pick a particular rhyme scheme? Or why would an author do that? So why might you pick like I don't know. I'm just gonna leave that question. Yes, there we go. Good. So Some rhymes can make it catchy, absolutely. To establish a theme, to establish tone, sure. Some are more childish or more mature, definitely. So going back to Carly Rae Jepsen versus Pink Floyd is going to be a totally different tone and totally different like audience that you're going for. You're trying to get in a pop song a pretty wide audience that's usually pretty young, versus dad rock is going to catch people. And I call it dad rock, but it's like not alternative. Shoot. Well, I'm gonna call it psychedelic rock anyway, but that's not dad rock. But like rock that has a deeper meaning and uses more metaphors is going to appeal to a usually an older crowd, or a crowd that you're listening. Like I will listen to both of those songs, but I'll listen to one to like think more and one to just kind of dance around. So going with more childish or more mature, or going with like, hey, what's the point of me writing this poem? Do I want to entertain people, or do I want to inform them and make them mad? So yeah, your rhyme scheme can totally do that, and so can an author's. Cool. And if you got other ones you can think of, you can put it in the chat too. We just talked about rhyme and tone. True rhyme versus slant rhyme. I like to ask this question. How many of you hate slant rhyme or half rhyme? I knew it. There's at least one, but I'm sure there's more than one. Oh, there you are. Why do you hate it? What's wrong with it? Maybe. So slant rhyme is when you are, so instead of saying, so cat and bat rhyme, slant rhyme might be cat and bad. So it almost rhymes. So how many of you don't like this? I got at least two. They're like, no, not cool. Why don't you? So it is uncomfortable. Good. I was going to say that. Like most people say like, it makes me feel like, oh, gross. Yeah, we want to hear, it depends on the context too. Okay, yeah. So if I would rather hear a slant rhyme than someone forcing rhyme. So if you want to, if bad works better in your poem, you're talking about a bad cat, than saying bat and randomly putting a bat in there, then that would be a better time to do that. It feels like it's a cop out. Nice. Like a slant rhyme is. Yeah, sure, fair enough. I would say it's uncomfortable because also we want things to match up with each other. So thinking about that feeling of discomfort, if you see that, someone may also be using slant rhyme in order to make you like notice it more and feel uncomfortable. Like, ew, that was not quite like exact rhyme. This isn't Dr. Seuss anymore. This is Seamus Heaney instead. If it's all intentional, that probably can't be a cop-out, right? Yeah. I mean, it's like, I would say the cop-out would be more forcing your rhyme than using a slant rhyme. But it depends on how like good you are at poetry too. So yeah, no, that's a good point though. Definitely. We already looked at an example. I want to move forward. We can go back to ballad structure at some point. So if you got a question about it, you can put it in the question box and I'll do that. But I do want to get to meter a little bit, because meter is the one that people are like, rhyme people feel pretty comfortable about. Like y'all immediately said, cool, this is AAAB, or this is the rhyme scheme here. But meter, like syntax freaks people out. They're like, oh God, what is meter? Anyone feeling like that? Anyone feeling like, oh, meter, oh geez. Hopefully not. 100. You feel it, yeah. Or when let's see, when someone says iambic pentameter, how do you feel? Give me an emoji. I want to see this. This is going to be amusing. Iambic pentameter. And while you put those emojis in there, I'm going to move the slide. I'm going to try to make meter not make you feel like you're going to cry. But I am going to get kind of technical today. But like I said, I want to break it down into pieces that are more understandable, because I know that if you've been in the situation, like I've taught for years, and I would always say, I want to get to meter, and I'll tell you about that later. And I never got to it because I just ran out of time. But I always want to break it down into little bite-sized pieces. Ah, there's my emojis. Okay, winky face is okay. Yes, I agree. Hermione is the real hero of the series. So let's talk a little bit about meter and a little bit about stress and how you can use that to your advantage on the exam. And the reason why you might want to use meter instead of just kind of sticking with rhyme and sticking with metaphor and sticking with subject matter is because this elevates you to a sophisticated level. And that's one of the hardest things to do on your essays, is like once you've reached a certain point, you're like, okay, cool. I'm now on kind of I'm going with the old scoring, like 1 through 9, but when you're at the 6, 7 level and you're like, I want to elevate this to the 8, 9 level. How do I do that? This is one of those ways you can do that. Okay, So meter, and this all went up at once. Don't freak out. I say that like I'm assuming that people will freak out. If you are, I'm sorry, I shouldn't say that. I should just assume you're sitting here very nicely like, yes, yes, yes. So meter, breaking it down, is the pattern, is just the pattern of stressed syllables in a given line of anything, but this specifically poetry. Everything that you say has stressed or unstressed parts. Every single word, every single phrase you say, you put stress on specific parts of that word. So some of you have gone through this and you're like, yes, I know this. And some of you may not have done this. So it's review for some, and some have not talked about this before. So bear with me if you talked about it. So I have 3 examples here. And of course I actually have 4 examples because Hermione's a great example of emphasis on a particular word. So you say the word kitty, for example. Now, normally you don't listen for your stress because why would you pay attention to the stress that you're saying? That's not useful to you in most contexts, but it is useful to you when you're reading and when you're trying to figure out a meter for a specific reason, and I'll get to that. So kitty, the stress is on the first syllable. So you don't say kitty because you sound like a weirdo if you do that. It's kitty. So the stress is on that first syllable. That's why I underlined it and bolded it. Same thing with sofa. When you're saying sofa in English, you say sofa with the emphasis on the so. If you speak Spanish, it's sofa, and you put the emphasis on the last syllable. I sound like a weirdo too. We all sound like weirdos are the coolest people. And then, so you can change up where, depending on like your language or what you're speaking to, you can change up like where the stress is. But in English, when you say sofa, sofa is on the emphasis on the so. And then potato, again, if you say the emphasis on the wrong part of the word, you sound like even more of a weirdo than you might already. So it'd be like potato, like, ooh, who is this person? It's potato. So every single word you say has stress somewhere. Most of the time you don't point it out because you don't have a reason to, but this is like you thinking about it. Yeah. So that's stress. That's what they're referring to when they're talking about meter and feet. So this is feet. So stay with me. If I'm going crazy places, please ask me. So meter is going to be measured in feet. So that's the iambic part. And I'll tell you like the meter feet, foot, feet. You know what I mean? In a moment. So each foot is just going to represent a pattern. So that's all it's referring to. Meter is a pattern of stressed and unstressed syllables. And again, I'll tell you why this is important because you're like, okay, why do I need to know this? And lovely Hermione, of course, depending on where you say it. If you say it wrong, you won't get the spell right. It's Leviosa, not Leviosa. All right, here's some common metric feet. So these are the ones you may hear. Some of you, I have a feeling that most of you have heard the first one. Some of you have heard the second one, and most of you have not heard the third or fourth one. That's okay. And some of you may have never seen any of these before in your life. Also okay, because again, you don't use these very often, except when you're really digging deep into literature. Because there's so many languages and because we love to emphasize different things, there's lots of different feet, but there are 6 main types. I'm only talking about 4, and I'm really only going to talk about 3, but I'm going to show you what 4 of them look like. Don't worry too much about scansion. I'm going to show you all 4, so I can go back to you. So iamb, that's the one that probably a lot of you have heard of, like iambic. That just means that the scansion there, scansion just means that's how you're marking a poem, is unstressed, stressed. So that's what the little is, it means unstressed, and the means stress, because that one is a lot more stressable of a mark. So words like create and extreme. I'm going to talk like a weirdo so you can hear the actual emphasis. Most of the time, again, you don't do that. So that's an iambic. So that's when someone says iambic anything, not just pentameter. They're just talking about the pattern is unstressed, stressed, unstressed, stressed, unstressed, stressed. So, and again, my next slide will tell you why that's important. Trochaic is just the opposite. Why is the, you know what? I don't remember why. I had it in another PowerPoint, and it may have been exactly like the asterisk meant, don't worry about this. So good question. I should probably take that out, but I'm not going to right now. So don't worry about the star. Oh yes, so Trochaic is just the opposite, so it's another pattern. Hero, candle. Something to think about when you're looking at these is that where that stress is coming into, If it's at the beginning, it tends to move the lines faster. So this is where your meter comes in when you're explaining it. So if you notice a lot of iambs, you'll notice it moves a little bit more slowly than a trochaic line. If you can remember to do that, which that'd be cool. And anapest has just 2 unstressed and a stress, so like overdue and interfere. So it moves it like this moves a lot slower than iambic. Was Macbeth trochee most? I'd have to look at the lines again. I'm reading Macbeth again, actually. I would say most of Shakespeare is iambic. Probably. I'm sure that Macbeth was at least partially trochaic, because it's not, no Shakespeare play is entirely iambic, and you'll notice that sometimes the Shakespeare plays are in chunks that are not poetic. They're like these long passages that are not the same length. So that's a good, actually, may put that in the question. Actually, yeah, I may put that in the question later. Yeah, good question. But most Shakespeare plays are put in iambic pentameter, and all of his, I say all with an asterisk, but I'm pretty sure it's all of his sonnets are in iambic pentameter. And dactyl is just the opposite of anapestic. If you are into like Greek poetry, like legit Greek, like the actual Latin Greek translations of it, not into English, but Latin and Greek, then they are actually written in dactylic, which moves faster. Not quite as fast as trochee, but it moves a little bit faster than anapest because it starts with that stress. And so it gets you into this rhythm like, oh yeah, let's go listen to a poem today. If you're a weirdo like me, we'll totally go listen to a poem. So those are your feet. Those are and this PowerPoint will also come on if you're like, oh my gosh, I'm not writing this down. It's okay. This comes, if you ever look back at the live stream, this is available in the notes too at the when you go back to Vibable and look at it. So this will be here forever and ever for you. Okay, so why the heck do we care? I always like to do that. So how does meter indicate tone? So why the devil do I care? And I explained it a little bit. So different base meters. So those are all base meters. And by the way, so just in case you don't know too, so those are the feet. If you hear pentameter, tetrameter, hexameter, all that, that's just referring to the number of times those feet appear. So pentameter means it appears 5 times in a line. Trimeter means 3 times in a line. Oh, I got a good question here. Let's put that in the question box. And I'm going to read that real quick, so let me see. Okay, I'll go back to your question in just a moment, Rebecca. Okay, so let's talk about base meter and then we'll go into that. So different base meters have different sounds, and so they affect the reader differently. So you notice an iambic meter, which is the most common one you're going to see in English, especially, I shouldn't say in English, like older English stuff like Shakespeare, anyone who's a contemporary of Shakespeare, and a lot of stuff written today too is also iambic. They tend to sound natural because it is pretty widely agreed that English is tends to sway towards alternating syllables, and most of the time we speak in iambs, which is kind of cool if you think about it, or if you don't think about it, whatever. So a lot of love songs, odes, and monologues and things that are done in theater are written in iambic because of that reason, because it sounds like kind of elevated speech, but most naturally or closest to it, if that makes sense. Which hopefully it does. So if you see iambic, then you can make the point that says this author wrote in iambic in order to have a more conversational tone, or to make it sound more like a human is talking to you. Trochaic is the mirror image iambic, but it just moves a little bit faster. It's more urgent because of the stresses on the beginning. So you might use a trochaic. If you notice trochaic meter happening in somebody's poem, then you might say, like, this is the poet going for more urgency here, or going more for a marching cadence here, like they're going to war, and this is indicating the warlike structure of this poem. Or a lot of rap songs are written in trochaic because it's moving you forward. It's like, it's not as it's like a cadence. It's like you stepping forward. I also say iambic meter also, they tend to be love songs too, because, and this could be like just really cheesy, but iambic also imitates the human heart. Ba-bum, 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 ba-bum. So that's why a lot of love songs are written iambic. So you can totally use that cheesy line in your essays too. But trochaic moves a little bit faster. And then, yeah, totally. And then an anapest, like I said, I'm only going to talk about 3 of them majorly today, because these are 3 of the very most common ones you see. And anapest is just like an extended iamb. That's the one that's unstressed, unstressed, stressed. They tend to sound more song-like, so they still sound a little iambic. They're used pretty commonly. They can sound a little bit more like your harp, but like your harp with a extra beat in it. So they're used a lot for more sing-songy stuff. So actually, I would love to go back and scan Carly Rae Jepsen to see if hers is written more anapestically than iambic. Extra credit for anyone who actually does that and wants it in their head. Just kidding, I don't give any extra credit, but I'll give you like proverbial candy or something. But a lot of like lighthearted stuff, like limericks, most of Dr. Seuss's poems, a lot of songs are written in anapestic just to create that song-like hemisphere. Yes, that is an excellent question. I'm gonna get to both of these. Okay, so let's talk about both of these questions. So first question is, so Rebecca says, should we analyze these forms of base meters when reading poems in the test, or should we focus on more on things like literary devices? I say focus on what you're the most comfortable with. So meter is a way to really, again, to get more elevated analysis of a poem. But one of my pitfalls at the end here is like, don't just point out a meter just to point it out. If you can do both things, point out figurative language and point out meter, that's going to look fantastic. But if you are super comfortable with figurative language and you're like, I'm still working on meter, then try working with meter, but like stick with what you think you're going to be the most successful with, if that makes sense. And so, yeah, then I feel like a lot of you will feel more comfortable with literary devices because you've been working with those for so long. I'm more comfortable with literary devices too. Like I'm still, because I just don't work with them. I don't work with meter as much, but meter can work in your favor too. So hopefully that answers your question. And then the second question here is, I understand the theory behind these, but so these being the meters, but it's difficult to hear the meter when reading. Any tips? So if you can, like obviously you can't read the poem out loud during the test, but if you can like move your lips, you can, I'm trying to say like, maybe not whisper super loud, but there's a way to kind of, I guess, try to like whisper really quietly. But that's pretty much my advice for being able to hear, because I'm also like someone who has to do something and kind of hear it. Practice also beforehand. So being able to look at poems and practicing and seeing, if you happen to notice something that looks a lot like a Shakespearean sonnet, then you can probably assume it's an iambic pentameter. And then you can mark it that way. And sometimes the meter doesn't go perfectly. Sometimes there is something that like takes it off. So that's again the change there. So hopefully that's helpful. I absolutely agree. It is hard to hear a meter when you're not reading it out loud. It is definitely, language is meant to be spoken. So hopefully that was also answered. And then third question here, will a specific question about meter be asked on the test? Maybe. Usually it's not asked, like it would be in the form of in an essay, like you can use such elements as figurative language, rhyme, and meter. So probably not, maybe in the multiple choice somewhere, like how does the meter affect the tone of the poem, or how does it create the poem, or what meter is it? But that's not a normal question. So this is more like a, hey, this is something you can use to help you understand something. So I believe it answers that. Oh, I see another question. Yeah, you're welcome. Absolutely. Yeah, this is one of those things that freaks people out, but hopefully not. You're feeling a little better about it, I hope. Sorry, so the question here is, what is the best way to learn how to analyze meter? To hear, being here, obviously, but so analyze it or mark. I'm going to go with analyze. So like you mark it, you understand it, you're like, okay, cool, this is here. Looking at a lot of poems that have a similar meter. So looking at a lot of poems that have like iambic pentameter. So for example, let's say you read the body of Shakespearean sonnets. Most of those sonnets are about love. So you can maybe make this blanket, not assumption, but like blanket statement that these sonnets, things that are written iambic, several of them are written about love. Or let's say you're reading a lot of things that are trochaic. So you notice that, hey, this is how I get these things. Like iambic tends to be more conversational, trochaic tends to be more cadency, because you read a lot of them and you notice patterns. So just practicing with looking at a lot of poetry, basically. And there's a ton of stuff online. I don't have any specific sites at the moment, but you can look at stuff online, like where can I find trochaic meter? What famous songs are in this meter? And what does this have to do with it? So there's lots of different ways you can do it. Just practicing is really the best way. And then I see a question here. So the question is, can we mark the literal poem on the test? Yup, you sure can. Mark up that poem. Always mark the poem. Always mark up anything you can write on, mark the crap out of it. This is both fascinating and terrifying. I totally agree, because it's like, oh my God, my whole life I've been speaking in these meters, and it's like, this has meaning to it. And also it's like technical. I love the technical stuff though, because technical stuff makes me feel a lot more comfortable, because I'm like, oh my God, something has a pattern instead of this nebulous, scary, like, oh my God, nothing makes sense. Maybe you feel the same thing simultaneously, and I'm really sorry if you do. Okay, let's get away from meter for a little bit. Yeah, so you're the same way. Yeah, same, it helps. Yeah, when I can break it down into pieces, like, okay, cool, this meter makes this meaning, then I feel like, oh, okay, good, I've got it. But some people are like, I don't want to know about the meter, I just want to look at the figurative language. All right, let's talk form poems. Cool forms to impress your weird friends and family. You'll probably not be the life of the party if you talk about these forms, but you know what? Forget it. They're not cool enough. All right, let's talk about the sonnet. I've got the sorting on here twice because he's just poetic and he's giving fun things. He doesn't do sonnets, though. He does ballads. Go back into Harry Potter and see that poem and see if you can scan it. Aha! All right, the sonnet. Sonnet's my favorite. Not my favorite type of poem. My favorite one, if I ever see it on the AP exam, which they've done it several times, it is, I don't want to say easy because easy is not the word. It's one of the ones that is, I would say, easy to find the form. Maybe not to read, maybe not to necessarily understand, but easy to find the form because it is short and specific. So a sonnet, as a review, some of you know this, some of you don't, it's got 14 lines. So if you see a poem on the exam that has 14 lines, then it's very likely a sonnet. And excellent question, Rebecca. Let me answer that. Do sonnets often appear on the AP exam? They have, I know at least like 5, 6 years ago or so, there were at least 2 in a row, like 1 year they had it and then the next year they had it. So sonnets actually do appear fairly often, like in the grand scheme of the world, in the grand scheme of the last decade. Yeah, they appear pretty often. So this is why in my classes I focus on the sonnet and I make people write a sonnet so you understand why someone might use that form. You are so welcome. I love questions. And I have another question. Does a lot of Shakespeare appear on the exam? Again, in the grand scheme of things, like, yeah, Shakespeare appears everywhere. I think they're getting better about putting more modern-ish stuff. Like they'll use like really old poetry, things that people don't recognize. But I think they're moving. I expect that there may be some Shakespeare on the exam, especially if you can always use a Shakespeare, I shouldn't say always, almost always use a Shakespeare on your essays because they'll give you the choices and they'll say like, write an essay on this. So a Shakespeare play can almost always be used for that. So yes. Ooh, I'm going to go back to the comment. I'm going to go back to that question. So hang tight. All right, let's talk sonnet real quick and then we'll talk about Villanelle and then we'll get to some more questions. So anyway, sonnet. If you see a 14-line poem, it's probably sonnet. Not always, but almost always. There is a specific rhyme scheme depending on the type. You don't have to point out the type. If you happen to remember it, great. If you don't, then that's okay. So Shakespearean has more of a variable type. It's like A, B, A, B, C, D, C, D, E, F, E, F, G, G. And then Petrarchan has more, because it's Italian, it's like A, I can't remember exactly, I think it's A, B, B, A, B, B, A, B, B, A. It just uses the same rhymes. Again, I'm going through that really quickly. It's not necessarily, I mean, if you want to look this up later too, go ahead. Sonnets are great, but you don't have to know. The key here to know is the volta, or a turn. This is why I like sonnets, because again, they're short, but also because if you notice a rhyme scheme changes, which it does in the sonnet, that means that the idea or the tone is also shifting. So this is a way that you use rhyme and rhythm, and mostly rhyme here, to show a shift in meaning in the volta. So wherever you see a rhyme scheme change, then you see an idea change. And I see your question. Rhymes are often not true rhymes necessarily because they're trying to fit, especially in English. We are not the greatest rhyming language, so we have a lot of slant rhyme, just to let you know that. Italian is a much better rhyming language. That's why Petrarchan sonnet has more of the same words rhyming with each other. Ooh, let's see. We're going to add your question to the question box. For most of the time, you're going to end up seeing a Shakespearean sonnet if it's in a really particular form. And when I say Shakespearean sonnet, it doesn't mean it was written by Shakespeare. It means it's written, it could have been written by Shakespeare, but it could also be written by somebody who was writing like in the same rhyme scheme as Shakespeare. So it's not always Shakespeare. It can be a modern, I've written a modern sonnet that was in Shakespearean rhyme, but it was not written in crazy Elizabethan English. So you may not see that. Okay, let's actually get to some questions. Okay, I'm gonna go to yours, Martha. What is the most common type of poem in the AP exam? I wouldn't say there is any of them, although I'd say sonnet is pretty high up there because I've seen it. Again, there was those 2 or 3 years where they did a sonnet, 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 like in a row, which is crazy. So sonnets, if you're gonna look up a form poem and really study it, sonnet is a good way to go. A lot of the poems, though, are free form. They will have rhyme schemes or rhythm schemes, or they will have stanza breaks. They will have all those things I talked about in the beginning, but they may not be in a form. So there's a lot of modern poetry too. I would say a common one is also a ballad, which is in quatrains, 4-line stanzas, and has a particular rhyme scheme. Modern ballads do their own rhyme scheme. Traditional ballads, I think, are A, B, C, B. So I would say those, but I would almost say the most common type of poem is a free form poem. All right, and this question is, other than maybe a Shakespearean sonnet or one like it, does the type of poem reveal something about the time period that would be important to help analyze the poem? Yeah. So, for example, so we'll go to the ballad. I said I would not talk about the ballad, but here I am. So someone either writing a ballad in the time period where ballads are like a thing, like the people going around playing the lute and singing a song about the heroes going to battle or whatever, or a love song between 2 people. It will indicate a time where people were saying things more orally. We're not writing things down. It's talking about the time period, like people being, I guess, less literate, but also more, I don't know, fantastical, like thinking things in more of a song-like way versus today you're writing more about like, oh, politics or, kind of similar stuff. I'm kind of going off on a tangent, but yeah, it can reveal things about the time period. Or if a lot of people are writing, like I'm going back, other than Shakespearean sonnet or one like it, let's see, what else would be one? You will notice that a lot of older poetry tends to rhyme. So they will have specific rhyme schemes because people will, in older, especially Shakespeare and before medieval poetry, it rhymed because, again, of that kind of oral history of people being illiterate, but also because people were following a specific form that was like, this is the acceptable form that would get you listened to. Versus today, that's not as important because a lot of people are literate, and that we don't necessarily need to memorize things anymore. That's what rhyming does for us too. So hopefully that answers the question. Yes, it can totally tell you about the time period. Okay. I love your questions because it makes me think about what I'm doing. So ask away. You are so welcome. All right. If you see a Shakespearean sonnet, the key thing to notice with it is the last 2 lines. They have a weird, because it's 14 lines, he's got like 3 sets of quatrains. So A, B, C, D, E, F, and the last 2 lines rhyme with each other. So there's like 3, there can be 3 voltas. The key with a Shakespearean sonnet is the last 2 lines tend to be ironic or tell you the meaning of the poem. So you may be thinking like you're reading, I plan to go through this, but I'm not going to go through it super into it. But like, for example, so a poem can look like it's about actually there was a poem that I taught too. It was not a Shakespearean poem. It was a Shakespearean sonnet. And it looked like it was a love poem to a woman. And it ended up being a poem that was like this dirty poem by the end of it, like and this was a poem written like the 1600s because people were so much dirtier than we are today. But anyway, those last 2 lines told you, or last 4 lines, I think, told you like, oh my gosh, he's not talking about like himself and his love, his heart. He's talking about another body part. So those last, like the rhyme scheme there actually changed the meaning from something like kind of romantic to something like, ew, gross. So I'll put that in the notes too, because it is, again, it's like a poem that was written. It's something that was on, I think, the AP exam maybe a while back or something very similar to it. So looking at those things, looking at a change in a rhyme scheme, irony may be present because the rhyme scheme changes. So you're just looking for that. Okay. Another common-ish type, these are 2 examples. So I marked this with colors where the rhyme scheme changes here. So There you go. So those last two lines make it, this will be up again, so you can always look at it. I have other materials too. So the last two lines make the poem not about, so a lot of people will see, oh, this is about the seasons changing. It's like, no, it's actually about a guy talking to his lover saying, I'm getting old and you see, but the last two lines say that you see me as something that is, your love gives me strength, basically. It's more than that. I'm really, really like glossing over it, but that's what I mean by like the last two lines making the poem have meaning. Hopefully that makes sense. Like I said, I'm going through it. Briefly talk about the Villanelle. This is just a very, very specific type of poem. It is 19 lines. I don't remember, I think there have been Villanelle, I'm pretty sure there have been Villanelles on the AP exam. I have not seen one recently in the last 10 years or so, at least on the essay part. So I'm not sure how common, but pretty sure they have been there before. So it's a little bit longer than a sonnet, and it's also separated into mostly tercets, which are 3-line stanzas, and the last thing is a quatrain, which is a 4-line stanza. And it just has a very specific, not a rhyme scheme, but the lines themselves are repeated. So this is where you're looking at repetition making sense. So the key with the Villanelle is that you notice that the repeated line changes meaning as the poem goes on, or it evolves into something else maybe. Good question. Is that, oh, did you find an example? Oh, I'm gonna click your link. Oh gosh. Let's find it. Okay, well, I'll wait for that to actually load. I will answer the question here. So these are the longest poems we're going to see on the exam. No, these are pretty short poems. I've seen in the last, so you ever go to AP Central, which again, I think I say this every time, go to AP Central, see where you can look at all these for no signing and they're all like free to look at, the last essays. Some of them will have pretty long, like I think maybe, I don't remember exactly how many years ago, but there's one that's like takes up it's two pretty dense columns of poems. So no, there are longer poems for sure. Thankfully, the one I'm thinking of was a more modern poem. So it's not you reading big chunks of Shakespearean text if you're not into that sort of thing. So there are longer poems. Yes, so quick Google search will give you like what poems you're looking for. Let's see. Where's the poem? Oh, yes, you found it. Yes, so absolutely. So what year was this? This was like, okay, this was 17 years ago. So if you look at that link that Mike put up, that is an example of a Villanelle that appeared on the AP exam. Gosh, 17 years ago? Good Lord, I'm getting old. So yeah, Villanelles do appear. The most famous one is probably the one that says, do not go gentle into that good night. And that is a line that is repeated throughout the poem, and it changes as the poem continues on. So it evolves into, it sounds like it's a poem about war and moving on, but it's a poem about Dylan Thomas's father fighting and not dying like in a weak way, but like, do not go gentle into that good night is death. Hey, 10 points for Hufflepuff, heck yeah. So yeah, the Villanelle. So you can always look back at this, you can look at specific tone shifts and how the repeated lines change meaning and whatnot. Other form poems, these are fun ones to look at. These are ones that I don't think, except for ballads, odes, elegies, those appear everywhere. I talked about ballad, and ode is something written to somebody or something, and then an elegy is something written to someone who's dead, which is why Aragog is on here. Cinquains, tonkas, haikus, sestinas don't really appear much, but that doesn't mean they won't appear, so know what those are. Cinquain is a 5, oh gosh, no. Yeah, I can't remember off the top of my head now because I want to be able to move it forward, but Sestina is really cool too. It's like a mathematical poem, so if you're super mathy, look up Sestina. Yes, I would, for the last one, yeah, kind of, that the picture of Harry Potter and Voldemort, I thought of that as being like, why did I put that there? First of all, villain. I was being stupid with my puns. What was the other reason why I put it there? It was something about, oh, it was do not go gentle into that good night, so they're fighting to the death. I was just being stupid. Aha! See, I'm an English teacher. I go deeply into stuff, way too deeply for anyone's whatever. Okay, final do and don't. Okay, the cat happens to have Harry Potter glasses. I actually didn't mean to put the cat there, but whatever. Okay. So do. So like you said, somebody asked before, how do I practice doing this? Or what if I'm more comfortable using figurative language than meter, or looking at form? That's okay. The best way to get better at it is to practice. So do practice looking closely and explaining form elements. So the best way to do that you can do practice exams. You can look at just going on to AB Central or Google search, whatever, and looking at the poems that have been in the past, or looking at other people's analyses of those poems as well. So doing your own analysis and then looking at somebody else's as well. You can also, Classroom is, I know that grades are crazy, oh my gosh, but Classroom is also a place to practice too. So taking risks is what gets you better scores too. Taking calculated risk, not just being silly about it, but like looking into meter and actually trying to talk about it. If you never talk about it, you'll never get better at it. Oh, I like that. Excellent. That's why I like pictures. It will stick. Hopefully it will. So remember, nothing in serious literature happens by accident. So just give it a shot. Practice. That's the way you get better. That's the way I know how to talk about meter, because I've looked at meter many, many times, and actually teaching it to somebody else is super helpful too. So if you want to sound really nerdy and got a nerdy friend that would be into meter, use it. One thing I will say, if you don't know what the meter's doing, don't just point out an element just to say, cool, I noticed that it's an iambic pentameter. Now you have something to say about iambic pentameter. So actually this should never happen anyway. But don't just point out an element just for the sake of pointing it out. Or I'm not saying you're showing off, like you're just like, oh my God, I want to point out everything. I really want to look smart on here, and you are all smart. So don't worry, anyone taking that AB exam, they're going to know that you have a brain in your head. But you don't need to show up. You don't have to point out every single thing. Don't point it out for the sake of pointing it out. Point it out because it proves your thesis statement. So be careful with that. Ooh, One Art by Elizabeth Bishop is another famous Villanelle. I have not read that one, so I'll have to read it. As usual, I'm on the Twitter, and I'm also in the emails, so you can always ask me questions, and this will be, I'll have some extra stuff on here. So that is it for tonight. I hope you've had a lovely time. I've enjoyed you. Yeah, you are so welcome, and I will see y'all next time. It's gonna be beautiful. Bye. Oh, I hope y'all have a good Halloween too. Hope you dress up in something fun. I'm gonna be a villager from Animal Crossing, so it's gonna be fun. Yep. Bye.